Trump humiliated her on national TV with one of the ugliest slurs imaginable. What Jasmine Crockett said back didn't just silence the room, it sparked a movement. It was supposed to be another predictable town hall, scripted questions, rehearsed answers, and enough political theater to fill an entire news cycle. But the energy inside the auditorium at Texas State University that night was different, not rowdy, not tense, just charged, like everyone in the room knew something big might happen. They just didn't know what. The event had been promoted as a conversation on racial unity and economic justice. President Donald J. Trump, in his usual bold fashion, had agreed to appear live and unfiltered, as the network framed it. Seated just 12 feet away from him across the stage, in a sleek navy pantsuit, was Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Texas's 30th District. She was sharp, calm. Her voice was clear and assertive as she challenged the administration's stance on police funding and racial profiling. "You've touted your support for law enforcement, Mr. President," she said, "but how do you reconcile that with the rise in wrongful detentions, particularly of black men, in states where your endorsements have helped shape law enforcement leadership?" Trump leaned forward, squinting slightly, and waved a hand dismissively. "We've done more for the black community than any president since Abraham Lincoln. You should be grateful." That was the moment Jasmine's face shifted, not with anger, not with surprise, but with a kind of practiced restraint. She glanced down at her notes for a beat before responding. "Gratitude doesn't replace justice, Mr. President. The numbers don't lie, and what I'm asking." Then it happened. Trump cut her off sharply. His voice dropped, as if he wanted to be heard but not quoted. But the microphone didn't miss a thing. "Shut your mouth, ape." The silence that followed was violent, a stabbing, breathless stillness that fell over the room in a split second. You could hear someone gasp in the third row. The moderator's eyes widened, and his mouth opened slightly, as if trying to form words. A student in the front row reached for her phone, hands trembling. The cameraman didn't pan away. Jasmine blinked once. Her hand went still above her notepad. She stared at the man across from her, not in disbelief, but as if she'd been expecting something like this all along. She leaned forward slightly, her hands folded neatly. "Mr. President," she said, her voice level, "I wasn't raised to match ignorance with silence, but I was taught that when someone shows you who they are, you listen. America just did." Her tone never cracked. Her expression never changed, but the entire room seemed to shift. The tension melted into something else, respect, awe, and a hint of shame. Even the moderator stayed quiet for a beat too long before fumbling to steer the program back. Across the country, people watching from their living rooms sat frozen. Some rewound the clip in disbelief. Others jumped on social media before the program even ended. It was raw, undeniable, and it was on national television. Back on stage, Jasmine didn't try to recover the question. She didn't try to force a smile. She just let the weight of what had been said, and what she had said in return, hang in the air. She looked out at the audience. Her eyes scanned the college students, the reporters, the single mother who'd asked her for a picture before the show started. Then she folded her notes and sat back in her chair. She didn't say another word for the rest of the segment. President Trump continued speaking. He acted as if nothing had happened, but something had. By the time Jasmine Crockett walked off the stage and into the green room, the clip had already hit Twitter. Her comms director, Tasha, met her with wide eyes and a phone shaking in her hand. "Jazz, it's already everywhere," she whispered. "I mean, people are losing it. Look." Jasmine took the phone, and for a moment, her face remained unreadable. But there it was, a grainy screen recording from someone in the audience, a 22-second clip, the insult, her response, no edits, no filters, just reality, raw and brutal. She didn't flinch, was already trending. In under an hour, news anchors were replaying the moment on loop. Cable panels were scrambling to book commentators. Even international outlets picked it up. Some didn't air Trump's exact words, they bleeped it or paraphrased. Others didn't, and those clips traveled faster. The hashtags piled up, hashtag Jasmine Crockett, hashtag she listened, hashtag America just did, hashtag presidential. The last one caught her attention. She looked up from the screen. Presidential, she said out loud. Tasha gave a short, stunned laugh. It's wild, right? Even people who usually don't agree with you, they're calling you the adult in the room. But Jasmine didn't smile. She sat down on the small couch in the green room, slowly pulling the pins from her hair as if trying to feel normal again. I wasn't trying to go viral, she murmured. I know, Tasha said, softening. But you didn't go viral. Truth did. Across the country, living rooms and group chats buzzed with disbelief. Screens lit up in dorm rooms from Santa Barbara to Syracuse. People couldn't decide what shocked them more, Trump's insult or the way Jasmine handled it. In Oakland, a high school senior named Jania watched it with her mother. I've never seen someone talk back like that, she said. Her mother didn't answer. She just teared up and whispered, she didn't even blink. In rural Oklahoma, a retired veteran named Thomas, who'd voted Republican since 1980, turned to his wife after watching the clip for the third time. That was wrong, he muttered. All of it. And that woman, she handled it better than I would have. But Jasmine wasn't reading the comments. She wasn't retweeting. She wasn't strategizing. She went home. Fort Worth was quiet that night. She kicked off her shoes, left her bag on the kitchen counter, and poured herself a glass of water, no wine, no music, just water and stillness. Her phone wouldn't stop vibrating, calls from news anchors, activists, old friends, people she hadn't spoken to since law school. She let most of them go to voicemail, but she answered the one from her father. He was blunt, as always. Baby, he said, that man showed his whole soul in front of America tonight. Jasmine let out a small laugh, the first in hours. You think it's going to cost him anything? She asked. Her father paused. Maybe not him, but it just gave a lot of people permission to open their eyes. That stuck with her. Meanwhile, civil rights organizations issued formal statements praising her restraint. Journalists who had never covered her before now called her a future voice for the Democratic Party. A few Republican strategists went quiet on social media. Others tweeted awkward attempts to change the subject. Then came the memes. One showed her face frozen mid-response above the words, "When Grace walks into the room wearing heels." Another had her quote written across a black background with gold lettering. People were printing it on shirts before the 24-hour mark. But none of that mattered as much to Jasmine as the text she got from a number she didn't recognize. It read, I don't know how to talk about race, but what you said tonight made me feel like maybe I should start. Thank you. That one made her stop mid-sip. She didn't respond, but she screenshotted it and saved it in a folder she would name, Why I Keep Going. Across America, the moment wasn't just viral, it felt true. People knew what they had seen. No excuses, no spin, just a woman standing her ground in the face of something ugly and doing it with her dignity untouched. In homes where kids were watching, Jasmine had said what many parents wished they could say so effortlessly. She hadn't yelled, she hadn't cursed, she didn't cry, she didn't beg for decency, she demanded reflection. But while the world reacted, Jasmine stayed unusually quiet for a reason. For 3 days, Jasmine Crockett said almost nothing, no interviews, no follow-up posts, no public appearances. While the media swarmed, speculating on her next move, Jasmine stayed grounded, intentional. She knew the moment had already spoken for itself. There was power in not rushing to explain it. She spent most of those 72 hours in her home district, not in D.C., not at CNN, Fort Worth. Her apartment sat in a modest neighborhood on the edge of town, near a middle school and 2 mom-and-pop soul food joints. No gates, no cameras, just home. From the outside, everything looked still. But inside, Jasmine was thinking, processing, writing. Her journal was open, pages halfway filled with sharp lines, notes, quotes she wanted to remember. She wasn't just trying to survive the noise, she was planning for what would come after it. On the second morning, her younger sister called from Cincinnati. "Jazz," she said, barely letting the line click before speaking, "do you even realize what you just did?" "I spoke my mind," Jasmine answered. "No, you showed people who didn't even know your name last week. They saw it, and they saw you." Jasmine stayed quiet for a second. "I didn't want to become a symbol," she said. "I just wanted to be honest." Her sister's voice softened. "That's exactly why it hit so hard." They stayed on the phone for almost an hour, talking about everything but politics, childhood, their late grandmother, their first trip to a protest as teens in Shreveport. Jasmine had been the one carrying a homemade sign that read, "Respect shouldn't be radical." She laughed, remembering it. "Guess I've always had a mouth on me," she joked. "Yeah," her sister said, "but you also knew how to use it." The next night, Jasmine met with her tightest circle in her living room, 4 people: Tasha, her comms director; Greg, her campaign strategist; Roman, her chief of staff; and her cousin, Alyssa, who'd flown in from Albuquerque to make sure Jasmine was eating and sleeping like a human. Greg started the meeting like a coach rallying a team. "We've got offers from MSNBC, CBS, The View, and 2 podcasts with national pull. We should consider hitting the circuit." Jasmine shook her head. "Not yet." Greg frowned. "You sure? Your name's hot right now. If we wait, we risk losing momentum." "I'm not chasing momentum," she said. "I want to do something that lasts." Tasha leaned forward. "So, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking people are listening now who weren't listening before. We should say something, but not to score a point." Roman chimed in. "Then what?" "To remind folks who this is really about, the girl in Tulsa who just got suspended for pushing back on a teacher's comment, the grandmother in Jackson who's raising 3 grandkids and can't afford her insulin, the college student in Detroit who volunteers every weekend and still gets followed in a store." She paused. "I want to speak to them, not the pundits." The room went quiet for a second. Then Alyssa, calm and observant as always, broke the silence. "You know," she said, "there's something in your voice tonight that reminds me of Aunt Bernice when she used to read the Bible out loud, not trying to preach, just telling the truth." Jasmine smiled faintly. "Then maybe I need to tell the truth out loud for real." Tasha raised an eyebrow. "You thinking speech, address, pre-recorded or live?" "Live," Jasmine said. "Unedited." "We'll do it from Texas Southern. That's where I found my voice the first time. Might as well use it now." Greg nodded slowly, as if coming around. "We'll handle logistics," Roman added. "We'll keep it tight, focused, no fluff, just you and the truth." The plan was set in motion, but as the team shuffled out into the hallway and the apartment grew quiet again, Jasmine sat back on her couch alone. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. She took a deep breath and opened her journal again. At the top of a blank page, she wrote in thick ink, "This is not about vengeance. This is about vision." She underlined it twice. But silence doesn't always mean inaction, and Jasmine was preparing. Before Jasmine Crockett could stand in front of the country again, she needed to go home, not to her apartment, but home. Texarkana, where the dirt was red and sticky after a rain, and the porch chairs creaked with age, where she used to sit in her father's old truck and practice her class speeches into a hairbrush, windows rolled down. She drove herself, 6 hours on the road with no press, no aides, just a playlist of gospel, early Jill Scott, and the occasional silence. No GPS, she knew every turn like the back of her hand. When she pulled into the gravel driveway of her parents' small one-story house, her mother was already waiting on the porch, arms folded, chin tilted slightly up, same as always. "You look tired," she said as Jasmine climbed out of the car. "You look like you've been reading comments online," Jasmine replied, smiling faintly. Her mother didn't return the smile. Not yet. She opened the screen door and let her inside. The kitchen smelled like fried cabbage and cornbread. A pot of beans bubbled quietly on the stove. The table was set for 3, though only 2 would be eating that night. Her father was still at the barber shop, finishing up a late trim for one of the regulars. "You said you didn't want to be a symbol," her mother said, pulling out a chair. "But baby, sometimes you don't get to choose." Jasmine sighed and sat. "I'm tired of being expected to be strong just because folks like him say things they'd never survive being told." "I know," her mother said. "But strength ain't the same as silence. And what you did that night wasn't just strong, it was clear. You showed them you don't need to yell to make a man shake." Jasmine stirred her beans quietly. Her eyes flicked to the window. Outside, the sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows over the backyard. "When I was 11, she said, Coach Waller called me a smart little monkey after I beat 2 boys in the spelling bee." Her mother didn't interrupt. "I didn't tell anyone. I thought if I told, it would become real. If I kept it inside, maybe it wouldn't shape me." She paused. But it did. Her mother reached across the table and laid a hand over hers, not soft, not coddling, just present. "Baby girl," she said, "that moment made you sharper, not smaller." Later that night, her father returned, graying beard, heavy boots, always smelling like shaving cream and peppermint. He walked in without a word, poured himself sweet tea, then sat across from Jasmine. He stared at her for a long second before speaking. "I served in a war where men used that same word, men who wore the same uniform I did. They could kill beside me but not eat beside me." Jasmine's throat tightened. "I saw the clip," he continued, "and all I thought was, there's my daughter, stronger than any man on that stage." They didn't talk politics after that. They watched reruns of Good Times, 8-pound cake, and stayed up too late. The next morning, Jasmine sat alone on the back porch with a notebook. The cicadas hummed in the distance. The breeze smelled like dust and honeysuckle. She scribbled down phrases for her upcoming address, some scratched out, some circled twice. One she couldn't get rid of: "We don't need to yell to be heard. We just need to speak when it counts." Before she left, her mother handed her a folded piece of paper. Inside was an old newspaper clipping, Jasmine's first student council win, age 13. "Just a reminder," her mom said. "You've been doing this a long time. You just have a bigger mic now." Jasmine hugged her longer than usual before getting back in the car. She didn't look back when she pulled out of the driveway, but she didn't need to. Something shifted in her mother's living room that night, something that made her stand up again. The auditorium at Texas Southern University was packed beyond capacity. Students stood against walls, sitting shoulder to shoulder on the steps. Outside, speakers had been mounted for the overflow crowd stretching into the quad. It wasn't a campaign rally. It wasn't a political spectacle. There were no banners, no balloons, no theme music, just a stage, a single mic, and a name that had suddenly become impossible to ignore. When Jasmine Crockett stepped into the light, the room didn't erupt with applause. It rose quietly, respectfully, like a congregation standing as a pastor enters the pulpit. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She placed her notes down, looked out at the crowd, and let silence work for her one last time. Then she spoke. "I wasn't planning to give a speech tonight," she began, "but when your name becomes a headline and your dignity becomes a debate, you don't stay quiet." The auditorium was still. Phones were recording, sure, but the room itself was listening. "I was called something vile last week, something that carries centuries of blood and memory. And while some folks are more shocked by the word than the weight it carries, I want to say this clearly, it wasn't new to me." She paused. "It wasn't new to my mother, who was asked if she worked in the house or the fields during a job interview in 1978. It wasn't new to my grandfather, who had to step off the sidewalk in Arkansas any time a white woman passed. It's not new to the kids I mentor who still get pulled over on the same street where I grew up. No yelling, just rhythm. Truth in every syllable. I didn't respond to the president to make a moment. I responded because silence would have told too many little girls that there's nothing you can say when power insults you. And I refuse to raise another generation to believe that lie. She scanned the audience, rows of young people, some wide-eyed, others quietly emotional. A girl near the back had her hands clasped like she was in church. A boy in the front row wiped his cheek with his sleeve. Jasmine continued, "Some people say I should have walked off that stage. Others say I should have shouted back, but I've been shouted at my whole life. And what I've learned is, if you want to shake a man who lives on noise, you hit him with stillness." The crowd stirred. A few claps, a few murmurs of "yes" and rippled through. I'm not here to demand respect from people who are committed to denying it. I'm here to remind the rest of us that we're allowed to claim it anyway. That's what this is about, not revenge, not performance, just truth. The cameras caught it. So did the students. And so did a 12-year-old girl named Lariah, watching on a laptop in her grandmother's kitchen in Wilmington, Delaware, whispering Jasmine's words as she spoke them. The moment that stuck, what would be replayed over and over, came next. Jasmine looked down, took a breath, then spoke more softly. America doesn't just need a better president. It needs better mirrors. We've been looking at ourselves through broken glass for too long, distorted, dishonest, and dangerous. If the truth makes us uncomfortable, that's a sign we should sit with it, not run from it. And then the line, "The highest office in this land called me an ape, but I'm not leaving that name with shame. I'm leaving it on the floor where it belongs and walking forward with my head high." Silence. Then the room erupted, not in cheers, but a slow, rising wave of clapping, deliberate, grounded, unstoppable. She didn't cry, but someone behind her did, a student, maybe, or one of the professors. It didn't matter. The tears weren't for pity, they were for release. When she stepped off that stage, the crowd stood until she disappeared behind the curtain. Backstage, Tasha met her with glassy eyes. "You didn't just give a speech," she said. "You lit something." Jasmine didn't say much. She just took a breath, held the mic in her hand for a second longer, and handed it back to the technician. But this speech did more than make headlines. It started a chain reaction. What began with a soundbite was now spilling into the streets. Within 48 hours of Jasmine's speech, more than 20 local organizers across the country had launched meetups under a simple but powerful banner, "We heard her." No celebrity endorsement, no party backing, just real people galvanized by the clarity of her voice. In St. Louis, a group of public school teachers met at a community center after work. They sat around plastic folding tables with notebooks and homemade flyers, making plans to teach Jasmine's speech in their civics classes. "We've never had someone say it like that," said Mrs. Karen Lewis, a third-generation educator. She didn't ask to be their equal. She reminded them she already was. In Little Rock, a youth-led voter registration team called Future First saw a record surge in volunteers. Their Instagram following tripled. Donations rolled in from people in towns they'd never even visited. Brixton, a senior at a community college in Tallahassee, hadn't been involved in politics before. But after watching Jasmine's address 3 times in one night, he grabbed a folding chair, set up on the corner of Appalachia Parkway, and started registering voters himself. "I didn't know the rules," he laughed in an interview later. "I just knew we needed more Jasmines in office, and that means more of us at the polls." Even in places far removed from Jasmine's base, the momentum was real. In Casper, Wyoming, a 34-year-old single mother named Erin wrote Jasmine a letter after hosting a backyard listening group with 7 of her neighbors, 5 of whom had never voted before. The letter read, "I may not share your experience, but I share your exhaustion, and I want to do better for my kids. Thank you for showing us how." And Jasmine, she kept working, no victory tour, no book deal tease, just back-to-back district meetings, phone calls with policy teams, and quiet planning for what she knew would come next. She did agree to one interview, NPR's All Things Considered. In it, she didn't rehash the insult. She didn't attack Trump. She talked about how power ignores people when it knows it's losing its grip. The goal, she said, isn't to clap back. It's to build forward. They'll keep trying to humiliate us, but we don't need their permission to lead. That line made it to the front page of the Philadelphia Tribune. Underneath it, a photo of Jasmine hugging a young girl outside the Houston town hall replayed on local channels like a loop. Even her critics were scrambling. Pundits who'd once dismissed her as too blunt now struggled to label her without drawing backlash. Some tried. They called her too polished, too prepared, calculating. But every time they did, another new voice pushed back online. She didn't calculate anything, one post read. She just spoke, and it hit because it was real. And that's what made the movement sticky. It didn't need permission. Students started printing parts of her speech on their dorm doors. Churches quoted her in Sunday sermons. One high school senior in Des Moines rewrote Jasmine's speech into a spoken-word poem for his final project and got a standing ovation. And in all this, Jasmine stayed focused. At night, she met with her team on Zoom, not to plot PR strategy, but to map out small-town visits. She wanted to go where most cameras didn't. "Let's go to Lancaster," she said one night. "Let's go to Tempe. Let's stop in Akron, Flint, Amarillo." Tasha tilted her head. "You really want to go there?" Jasmine nodded. "That's where the kids are watching, and they're the ones we owe the most." They built a calendar, no big arenas, no elaborate stage setups, just local rec centers, school gymnasiums, and community halls with folding chairs and chipped paint on the walls, places where people felt invisible. Jasmine made sure they knew she saw them. But not everyone was cheering. Some were sharpening their knives. It didn't take long for the backlash to show up. 3 weeks after Jasmine's speech at Texas Southern, the White House press room buzzed with quiet tension. The president, appearing unbothered, addressed a question about the incident with a shrug. "She's just another radical trying to make herself famous," he said. "They love playing the victim. That's all this was, another performance." That clip didn't go viral. It didn't have the same weight. But it made its way into the commentary circuit. Fox News panels debated her real intentions. Pundits who'd once ignored her now picked apart her tone, her dress, her choice of words, her pauses. And then came the so-called exposé. A conservative blog published a headline, "Who is Jasmine Crockett really?" Legal records reveal a troubling past. It claimed she'd once defended a violent criminal with gang ties. The article cherry-picked an old court case from her public defender days, stripping it of context and twisting it into an attack on her character. The story spread fast. Talk radio hosts ran with it. A senator from Iowa retweeted it, writing, "People need to understand who's really behind the mask." Within hours, Jasmine's office was flooded with calls. Not from journalists, from angry strangers. "She's defending killers. She hates this country. She needs to go back where she came from." Roman, her chief of staff, slammed his laptop shut after reading the fourth article. "This is calculated," he said. "They're trying to corner you." Jasmine looked up from her desk. "I'm not surprised. They've got no idea how many courtrooms I've stood in, face to face with injustice. But people don't know that," Tasha added. "They don't get the nuance. All they see is a headline and a photo." She turned her laptop to show a photoshopped image of Jasmine behind bars circulating on fringe pages. For the first time, Jasmine sat back and rubbed her temples. "I knew they'd come," she said. But I didn't think they'd go this low, this fast. Roman was pacing. We can sue. We've got the truth. We can bury this in court. But Jasmine shook her head. No, we don't waste energy swatting at mosquitoes. She stood and walked to the window, watching the sun creep behind the skyline. This isn't about me. This is about whether truth can still live when lies get microphones. That night, she went home earlier than usual, but the wait followed her. Around 11:30 p.m., her phone buzzed. It was a voicemail from a young intern on her team, Simone, barely 20, wide-eyed, still learning politics. I'm sorry to call so late, her voice trembled. But I just needed to say, I don't know how you do it. I've only been here 2 months, and this week, I've been scared to walk home. I've gotten calls, texts, even someone yelling outside my apartment. And it's not even about me. It's about being near you. Jasmine listened to the message twice. Then she called Simone. They talked for 45 minutes. Jasmine didn't offer clichés. She didn't promise it would all get better, but she told her the truth. Fear wants you to sit down, she said. But if you sit too long, it'll convince you you're not meant to stand. Simone didn't quit, and neither did anyone else on the team. The next morning, Jasmine held a press conference, no podium, no teleprompter, just a short table, a few reporters, and a single page in her hand. She read directly from it. I did defend people charged with violent crimes. I did stand in front of judges who didn't believe in justice for all. That's what public defenders do. We stand for the people no one else will. I'm not ashamed of that. I'm proud of it. She folded the paper. And if that makes me a target, so be it. At least I know who I'm fighting for. That clip made it to CNN, NBC, and even late-night comedy monologues. The attacks didn't stop, but neither did the letters. A teacher from Phoenix sent her a note with a hand-drawn picture from one of her third graders, captioned, "Miss Crockett is brave." A father from Ohio wrote, "You're the reason my daughter wants to run for student council." Inside her office, Jasmine taped both to the wall beside her desk. Then she picked up the phone and said to Roman, "Let's head to Dayton next. I want to talk to people face to face." But Jasmine wasn't backing down, not now, not with so many watching. The Dayton Community Civic Center smelled like old paint and popcorn oil, the kind of place where people came for school board meetings and weekend Zumba classes. On that night, it held more than 200 folding chairs and a buzz of anticipation that made the air feel tight. Jasmine Crockett walked in through the side entrance, no press crew, no entourage, just her, Tasha, and a printed speech folded into her jacket pocket. The town hall wasn't being streamed. It wasn't coordinated with any network. It had been promoted by flyers taped to grocery store doors and Facebook posts shared by local organizers. It was grassroots, raw, and exactly where Jasmine wanted to be. She stepped onto the small stage as people finished their boxed dinners and murmurs quieted down. A few cell phones went up, but most of the room just waited. "Thank you for letting me sit with you tonight," she began. No mic needed. For the next 15 minutes, she addressed police reform, housing inequities, and public school funding, punctuated not by applause lines, but by nods and quiet hums of agreement. Then came the shift. During the Q&A, a 12-year-old girl stood up. She wore a gray hoodie and pink glasses that slipped down her nose. She had one hand in her jacket pocket and the other clenched around the mic that was too big for her hand. "My name is Elena," she said, "and, why do people hate people like us?" You could hear the air get pulled from the room. Jasmine blinked once, then slowly stepped off the stage and walked toward the girl. She knelt beside her, eye level, no barrier between them, just two people, one with power, one with questions. "I can't tell you exactly why, Elena," she said softly, "but I can tell you it's not because of anything wrong with you." The girl's lip trembled slightly. "Sometimes," Jasmine continued, "people hate what they don't understand, or they hate what they've been taught to fear. And sometimes they hate people like us because we remind them of truths they'd rather not face. Elena didn't look away. She nodded. But I want you to hear this, Jasmine said, her voice now reaching the rest of the room. Their hate is not your burden. Your job isn't to carry it. Your job is to keep learning, keep growing, and to never believe the lie that you're less than someone else just because they speak louder. Elena hugged her right there in front of everyone, no prompting, just need and instinct. The room applauded, not loudly, but fully. Even a few men in the back stood up quietly, hands clasped in front of them, unsure how to show what they felt. Backstage later, Roman sat stunned. I didn't know you were going to go off script like that, he said, handing her a bottle of water. I didn't either, Jasmine replied. But that girl wasn't asking about policy. She was asking about pain. By the next morning, a local journalist's video clip of the exchange had over 1.2 million views, no editing, no hashtags, just a shaky phone recording and Jasmine's voice cutting through years of noise. Celebrities reposted it. So did school teachers and youth pastors. One tweet read, "She didn't answer like a politician. She answered like someone who'd been that little girl once." Back in D.C., lawmakers whispered about her again, some with admiration, some with concern. One senior strategist on the Hill texted another, "She's building something, and it's not just attention, it's loyalty." But Jasmine wasn't checking headlines. She was still in Dayton, helping clean up chairs, her heels swapped for sneakers. An elderly woman approached her with a worn photo in hand. "This is my daughter," she said. "She passed last year, but if she were here tonight, she would have cried hearing you talk to that little girl." "Thank you," Jasmine said. She didn't speak further. She just held the photo for a moment, then handed it back with both hands. But Jasmine had one more play in mind, and it had nothing to do with politics. A week after Dayton, the phones in Jasmine Crockett's office didn't ring with press requests. They rang with offers to help. The energy wasn't coming from the top down. It wasn't driven by consultants or donors. It was springing up in places most political campaigns never touched: public libraries, corner barbershops, church basements, high school gymnasiums. And it all shared one thread: people weren't just praising Jasmine, they were building on what she'd said. It started small. A group of volunteers in Baton Rouge created a civic literacy program named Speak Anyway, modeled after Jasmine's words to Elena. They made worksheets on how to engage school boards, register to vote, and speak at city council meetings. It wasn't flashy, but it worked. In Sacramento, a nonprofit called Hands in the Soil began organizing panels on the intersection of local policy and racial trauma. Their motto: "We plant now so they can stand later." Jasmine noticed. She read every email she could, including the one from a retired mechanic in Wichita who wrote, "I've never written a politician in my life, but your words made me feel like maybe I should, maybe it matters." And then came something bigger. Her team had quietly been building a national initiative, something separate from her office, free from party labels, a platform where communities could gather and lead their own change. They called it Clear Voices. It launched with a short mission: no headlines, no filters, just tools, truth, and people who give a damn. The first meeting was held in Tulsa, inside a union hall built in the 60s. 40 chairs, 37 people showed up. By the end of the month, there were chapters in over 20 cities, many in places where activism usually meant voting once every 4 years. Jasmine wasn't the centerpiece. That was intentional. She didn't want her name on it. She wanted her impact to be the foundation, not the brand. Movements don't need heroes, she told Roman during a quiet drive through Des Moines. They need mirrors. But even without her name in the logo, people knew where it started. That's why the letters kept coming. One arrived in a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside was a photo of a farmhouse in rural Nebraska and a handwritten note in blue ink: "We don't get many women like you out here, but I showed your speech to my kids. They're asking different questions now, better ones. Maybe I am, too. Jasmine carried that one in her bag for weeks. And at night, when the noise of politics quieted and the room emptied out, she'd sit at her desk and reread it, not because she needed to be affirmed, but because it reminded her why she was still here. In those moments, she thought often of her grandmother, who used to say, "You can't choose your moment, but you can choose what you do with it." So, Jasmine chose to keep going. She launched a small grant program for student leaders across the country, no GPA requirement, no fancy essay, just one question: what would you change if people finally listened to you? The submissions poured in. A teen in Maine wrote about starting a mental health program at her school where kids could talk to each other without fear. A boy in Detroit wrote about building a mobile tutoring van for neighborhoods without libraries. A girl in Mobile, Alabama, sent a video of her using Jasmine's speech in a spoken word competition. She called it "The Day the Mic Fought Back." Jasmine read every single one. She met with her team again in Dallas. "This isn't a moment anymore," Roman said. "It's something else." "Good," Jasmine replied. "Because moments fade, but this has roots." She stood, walked to the whiteboard, and began listing cities they hadn't visited yet: Boise, Augusta, Laredo, Fresno. "You're really doing this," Tasha said. "No," Jasmine answered. "We are." But the final moment, the one that really mattered, happened far from the spotlight. There was no camera crew when Jasmine Crockett sat alone on a worn bench in Lincoln Park, Fort Worth. No lights, no crowds, just a few families in the distance, kids chasing each other between trees and an elderly couple sharing a paper plate of barbecue ribs under a gazebo. Jasmine sat still, her blazer folded beside her, phone face down. Her eyes were locked on a group of teenagers laughing near the basketball court. One wore a hoodie with the words, "Clear Voices," screen-printed across the back. She didn't interrupt. She didn't introduce herself. She just watched. This was why she hadn't quit. After months of chaos, scrutiny, and targeted attacks, what stuck wasn't the insult that had shocked the country. It was what came after, what people chose to do with it, how they took one moment and turned it into momentum, not the political kind, the human kind. Her phone finally buzzed, but she didn't pick it up right away. The screen lit up with a name she now recognized immediately: Simone, the young intern who'd once called her in tears, shaken by threats from strangers. Simone's text was short: "We filled the room in Shreveport, standing room only. They asked if you'll come next time." Jasmine smiled, then replied with a single sentence: "I'll be there." She leaned back, exhaled, and let herself feel it, not pride exactly, not relief either, just stillness, peace that didn't come from winning, but from knowing she hadn't stepped back when it would have been easy to. That's when the call came. Tasha's voice, on the other end, was excited but composed. "You ready for the schedule?" she asked. "Go for it. 3 town halls next month: Cedar Rapids, Bakersfield, and Wilmington. 5 school visits, 2 Clear Voices summits, and there's been a quiet invitation from a senator, Republican, wants to talk off record." Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "That's unexpected." "Not as much as you'd think," Tasha said. "People are paying attention differently now." Jasmine didn't respond right away. She stared out at the field again. A little girl was helping her baby brother tie his shoe while their father waved from a bench. Then she said, "Let's keep the meetings small, intimate. They don't need to be big. They just need to be honest." After hanging up, she reached into her bag and pulled out a letter, the one from Nebraska. She read it again for the 5th time that week: "Maybe I am, too." 6 words, but they stuck because it meant something was shifting, not just in the people who already believed in her, but in the ones who had never listened before or who had never wanted to. She stood, slipped the letter back into her bag, and took one last glance at the kids on the court. "Keep playing," she whispered. She walked to the van parked nearby, where Roman was waiting. As she climbed in, he asked, "Where to next?" She smiled. "Wherever they're still asking questions." He chuckled. "That's everywhere." As they pulled out of the park, she looked down at the list of upcoming stops. She didn't see them as cities anymore. She saw people: Elena in Dayton, Brixton in Tallahassee, Erin in Nebraska, the girl with the spoken word poem in Mobile, and hundreds of others who didn't want perfect speeches. They wanted to feel seen. No one knew what would come next, whether she'd run for higher office, whether her movement would last 5 years or 50. But Jasmine wasn't thinking about legacy in those terms. She thought about her grandmother's voice, her father's tired eyes, her sister's laughter, Elena's trembling question, "Why do they hate people like us?" And Jasmine's answer, still true, "Their hate is not your burden." She didn't carry their hate. She carried their hope. As the van merged onto the freeway, sun setting low and gold in the rearview mirror, Jasmine glanced out the window and whispered one last sentence, "Let's go meet the people." If this story moved you, share it. Talk about it. Teach it. Remind someone, maybe even yourself, that silence isn't always safety, and stillness can be strength. Subscribe for more stories that reflect real voices, real pain, and real change. Because the mic belongs to all of us, and it's time we speak when it counts.